Why does stillness make us so uneasy? Why does a woman's silence, especially the silence of her body, provoke so much discomfort in others, and often in herself? We live in a culture that equates movement with meaning, desire with value, and constant connection with emotional health. From a young age, women are taught that being visible, desired, and emotionally available is not just encouraged, it's required. If she withdraws, if she chooses solitude, if her body no longer participates in the dance of desire, the world labels her as broken, cold, or incomplete. But what if that silence is not an absence but a message? What if the moment the body stops reaching out is not the end of something, but the beginning of a deeper journey inward? There are times in a woman's life when external stimulation no longer satisfies, when old patterns stop making sense, when even the most intoxicating forms of affection begin to feel hollow. And it is often in those quiet, confusing moments that something sacred begins to stir. A new awareness, a call, a return. Carl Jung believed that when the conscious self can no longer carry the weight of denial, the soul begins to speak. Not through loud declarations, but through subtle inner unrest, through silence, through an ache for something she can't quite name. That silence isn't void, it's voice, a language older than words. And so in this video, we explore what happens when a woman chooses abstinence not as a rejection of love or pleasure, but as a portal to power, clarity, and self-possession. We'll walk through the internal transformation that occurs when the body grows quiet and the soul begins to speak in its place. In the cultural landscape, a woman's worth is too often measured by her desirability, her emotional availability, and her participation in romantic dynamics. From media to social norms, the message is constant. To be wanted is to be alive. Within this framework, abstinence, whether from sex, relationships, or superficial emotional entanglements, is seen not as a conscious act of sovereignty, but as a symptom of failure or lack. Yet when a woman steps back, either intentionally or instinctively, she begins to hear something beneath the noise of expectation. This is not repression. It is the redirection of sacred energy. Jung reminds us that nothing repressed stays buried. It transforms, and in abstinence, that transformation begins inwardly. As her body grows quiet, other senses sharpen. She begins to dream more vividly. Her intuition deepens. She feels her inner world move with a rhythm that was always there, but drowned out by external pursuit. What the world might call loneliness, she starts to experience as communion with herself, with something eternal, ancestral, and raw. This marks the first crossing, the end of performance, and the beginning of perception. The woman does not go silent because she has nothing to say, but because for the first time she's listening. And that silence, paradoxically, is where the voice of the soul emerges. But the soul's voice does not soothe at first, it confronts. As the woman pulls back from the constant stimulation of desire and attention, she begins to feel everything she once avoided. The structures she leaned on, titles, roles, romantic attachments, start to fall away. What remains is an identity stripped bare. She is no longer someone's, not a girlfriend, a muse, a fantasy. She is simply herself. And the rawness of that realization can be excruciating. Jung called this the meeting with the shadow, the unlit parts of the psyche that contain our unmet needs, repressed instincts, and unlived truths. In this stage, abstinence can feel like punishment, not because it harms, but because it forces clarity. She questions her choice. Doubt creeps in. The silence that once felt sacred begins to ache like absence. Friends may pull away. Society whispers that she's wasting time. But deep within, she knows she's not withdrawing. She's descending. This isn't isolation, it's initiation. A return to the deepest layers of self that had been traded for acceptance, for belonging, for illusion. And it's here in the ache that something ancient begins to stir. the old identity fractures, and the true self begins to gather its strength. With time, the silence that once seemed barren reveals itself as deeply generative. The absence becomes a womb. In this space, she is not passive, she is preparing. Not waiting to be chosen, but becoming the one who chooses. Her abstinence is no longer interpreted through the lens of lack, but of sacred intention. She is not withholding. She is protecting something delicate yet powerful that is forming within. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. She begins to sense herself as sovereign. Her value is no longer measured by her desirability, but by the authenticity she carries. Jung called this individuation, the process through which a person becomes whole by integrating shadow and light, instinct and spirit, memory and possibility. In this state, she is no longer pulled by hunger. She is shaped by discernment. The rituals of her life change. She moves slower, listens deeper, speaks less, but each gesture is full of presence. The silence becomes fluent, and her power becomes quiet but immovable. What once felt like self-denial now reveals itself as self-initiation. And then one day something clicks. The discomfort doesn't vanish but transforms into awareness. The loneliness doesn't grip, it hums. Her inner world, once chaotic with longing, now holds space. She doesn't feel empty, she feels precise. Her energy is no longer scattered in search of validation. It's consolidated, magnetic, whole. The woman who once feared being alone now guards her solitude with reverence. She knows her company is not a consolation, it's a gift. This is the moment the world begins to misread her. Not because she is distant, but because she is no longer available for dilution. She doesn't seek love to complete her, but to reflect what she already embodies. Jung wrote that what we deny enslaves us, but what we integrate transforms us. This woman has turned denial into awareness. She has made silence her guide. She no longer needs to be rescued. She has become the one who rescues herself. And when love returns, if it does, it will not find a woman in waiting. It will find a woman in sovereignty. She does not bend for connection. She becomes the fire around which the right souls gather. The journey wasn't about absence. It was about remembering that nothing outside can nourish what we haven't first awakened within. The silence of the body is not emptiness. It is the sacred pause before transformation. What looks like withdrawal is often a return to essence. When a woman turns inward, not out of fear but from an urge to reclaim herself, she doesn't disappear. She emerges. The voice that rises within her isn't loud, but it is unshakable. Once heard, it cannot be forgotten. This path of abstinence and introspection is not about rejection, but about remembering. Remembering a power that doesn't beg to be seen, because it knows its own presence. She no longer seeks love to feel whole. She brings wholeness into every connection. She no longer fears being alone. She walks with herself as her most honest companion. If this message stirred something in you, share it in the comments. Your voice matters, and it may echo in someone else's healing. And if you want to keep exploring this kind of raw, soul-centered truth, subscribe to the Mental Dose channel. Here, every word is intention, and every silence is space to grow. You're not alone. The ache you feel is the beginning. Trust it. Follow it. Because when the body grows silent, the soul begins to speak, and it speaks only in truth.